දවස් 30ක්ම unlimited Netflix බලන්න. Unlimited data pack එකක් මුළු පවුලටම unlimited fun එකක් අරගන්න. අදම active කරගන්න.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, the game has changed. Experts analyse what Biden presidency would spell for Sri Lanka.
I do not think the US would use unnecessary force or intervention on Sri Lankan affairs because that will risk Sri Lanka being pushed more towards China.
So there has been a major change now in the international environment. It's very different from when the new government of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa took over last year.
Sweet relief. The Western province set to come out of lockdown with many areas left in isolation. Community spread or not? That's the question. The epidemiology unit called to clarify the present state of COVID-19 spread in line with WHO document. It's not all virus. All 4 persons who fell victim to COVID-19 yesterday suffered from underlying health conditions. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Sunday, the 8th of November, 2020.
Nava sunlight sakura. Then Dikukal pavathina sakura mal suwandin.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhamike Kanai. Now, the Government Medical Officers Association calls on the epidemiology unit to clarify whether Sri Lanka is currently experiencing the first stage of COVID-19 community transmission, despite its insistence that it isn't. The GMOA says that how the cases were detected in the Western province and in the rest of the country should be explained in line with a document of the World Health Organization on the virus spread. In the meantime, it was revealed that all 4 COVID-19 deaths which were reported late yesterday had a common denominator, which is underlying health conditions. Though the number of infections are rising, so are the recoveries, with 562 patients being given the all clear to leave hospitals today.
Sri Lanka lost 4 more lives to COVID-19 last evening. The Department of Government Information said that the deceased are from the areas of Ganemulla, Maligawatha and Vellampitiya. The deceased from Vellampitiya, a 67-year-old, had passed away at his residence and had been suffering from chronic illnesses. The Department of Government Information said that the victim had also suffered from fever for a number of days. Meanwhile, 2 persons from the Maligawatha area are among COVID-19 deaths from yesterday. One is a 42-year-old and she had been suffering from heart disease, and the death is considered to have been caused by a combination of a heart condition and COVID-19 infection. The Department of Government Information confirmed that she too had passed away at her home. The second victim from Maligawatha is a 69-year-old. The Department of Government Information says that she too had been suffering from chronic illnesses and she passed away after being admitted to the Colombo National Hospital. The 4th COVID-19 victim from yesterday is an 88-year-old from the area of Ganemulla, and he is an associate of an infected person from the Minuwangoda cluster. He had been diagnosed with the virus under quarantine and had been admitted to the Pallegama Hospital in Laggala. With his condition worsening, the 88-year-old had been transferred to the National Institute of Infectious Diseases in Angoda, where he succumbed. COVID pneumonia and blood poisoning are given the cause for his death. In the meantime, the body of a 71-year-old who had died at home in the area of Velmilla in Bandaragama was taken to the Horuna Hospital for PCR test today by health authorities. All the people who had gathered at the house where the victim's body was kept were also sent for self-quarantine. Meanwhile, the number of COVID-19 infections confirmed from the island yesterday is 449. Most of them are from the Colombo district with 177 cases. 174 infections were reported from the Gampha district, with Kurunagal recording 25, Kegol confirming 14, while 10 and 9 cases were reported from Kalutara and Kandy districts. Further 9 cases were confirmed from the Puttalam district, 6 from Ratnapura, 4 from Batiklo, 3 from Gaul, while a case each were recorded from the districts of Matale, Hambantota and Monaragala. Health authorities say that 4 foreign arrivals in quarantine and a police officer were also diagnosed with the virus yesterday. What's more, 136 COVID-19 infected persons were hospitalized yesterday from the areas of Jayala, Wattala, Paliyagoda, Mahara, Kalaniya and Gampaha. Among them are employees of the Velisar Economic Centre and the Keravala factory in Wattala. In the meantime, the AdaDerana correspondent said that 10 persons from the area of Mirigama tested positive for COVID-19. Associates of the infected from the Paliyagoda fish market residing in the area of Mirigama were conducted recently. There have been 2,756 confirmed infections within the first 7 days of the month of November alone. From that, the highest number of infections were confirmed yesterday with 449. Meanwhile, the number of COVID-19 patients to have recovered from the virus within the last 7 days exceeds the number of infections confirmed during that time. 3,314 patients in total have recovered within the last 7 days, with the highest single-day recoveries of 765 during that time was recorded on the 5th of November. With that being the case, 562 COVID-19 patients were confirmed as recovered today alone. Although the recoveries outnumbered the infections, there had been 14 COVID-19 deaths within the last 7 days. It is the highest number of deaths to be confirmed within a week. The country's highest number of single-day deaths were also recorded on the 5th of November with 5. Since the COVID-19 outbreak first came to being in Sri Lanka, 13,702 cases have been confirmed in the island. From that overall figure, 8,282 patients have recovered, leaving 5,383 under treatment. The overall number of COVID-19 related deaths in Sri Lanka is 34.
ලෝක සෞඛ්‍ය සංවිධානයේ මේකේ අදියර 7ක් ගැන කතා කරනවා. 4 5 6 7 කියන්නේ සමාජ ව්‍යාප්තිය. අඩු තීව්‍රතාවයකින් රෝගීන් තැන් වලින් වාර්තා වීම තමයි සමාජ ව්‍යාප්තියේ පළවෙනි අදියර. ඒතකොට දැන් ඒක සිද්ධ වෙමින් තියෙනවානේ. දැන් උදාහරණ පරිපාලන දිස්ත්‍රික්ක 25ම රෝගීන් වාර්තා වෙනවානේ. ඊගාවට පස්වෙනි අදියර තමයි මොඩරේට් ඉන්සිඩන්ස්. එන්න මධ්‍යම මට්ටමේ රෝගීන් වාර්තා වෙනවා නම් තීව්‍රතාවයකින් යුක්තව රට පුරා විවිධ තැන් වලින් ලෝකලි ඇක්වයර්ඩ්. ඒ කියන්නේ දේශීය වශයෙන් හොයාගත්තා. 6 වෙනි අදියර කියලා කියන්නේ high incidence. 7 වෙනි අදියර කියලා කියන්නේ very high incidence. ඒ කියන්නේ අධික තීව්‍රතාවයකින් රෝගීන් වාර්තා වෙනවා නම් ඒක සමාජ ව්‍යාප්ති කෙලවර. අපි ඒ වගේ තැනකට ගිහිල්ලා නැති වුණාට අපි සමාජ ව්‍යාප්තිය මුල් අදියරට හරි ඇවිල්ලාද කියන එක විශේෂයෙන් බස්නාහිර පළාත තුළ මේ තත්ත්වය තියෙනවද කියන එක ඒ වගේම රටක් විදියට දිස්ත්‍රික්ක 25න් වාර්තා වෙලා තියෙන තත්ත්වයටදී අපි සමාජ ව්‍යාප්තියට ගිහිල්ලාද කියන එක මේ ලියවිල්ල පාදක කරගෙන ඉතාම කෙටි කාලයක් ඇතුළත මේ රටේ විශේෂඥයන් විශේෂ වගකීම් යන වසංගත රෝග විද්‍යාංශයට ඒ අය පැහැදිලි කළ යුතුයි.
Safeguard hand sanitizer නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නිරෝගීමත් දිවියකට.
Now, numerous areas in the Western province will remain in isolation when the quarantine curfew in the province lifts tomorrow morning. What's more, the status of isolation will also extend to some areas outside the Western province as well. Though movements through these areas will be allowed, vehicles passing through cannot board or disembark people. Here's what you need to know ahead of tomorrow's curfew lift in the Western province.
The quarantine curfew was declared in the Western province from the midnight of the 29th of October as a measure to avoid the spread of COVID-19. Though it was due to be lifted on the 2nd of November, the quarantine curfew was extended until tomorrow. With that being the case, the curfew will be lifted in the Western province at 5 a.m. tomorrow. However, several areas in the province will remain under the status of isolation until further notice. Accordingly, the police areas of Mattakulliya, Modara, Blumendal, Kotahena, Grand Pass, Foreshore and Barber Street in the Colombo district will remain under isolation. Furthermore, the police areas of Maligavatta, Dematagoda, Vellampitiya, Kesalvatta and Borella will also be isolated. In the Gampaha district, the police areas of Vattala, Paliyagoda, Kadawatha, Ragama, Nigambo, Pamunugama, Jayala and Sapugaskanda will be under the status of isolation. Meanwhile, in the Kaluthara district, Horana and Ingiriya police areas as well as the Gramaniladara division of Vakada West will also be under isolation. Apart from those areas in the Western province, the government has also decided to isolate several other areas in the country as well. As such, police areas of Kuliyapitiya and the Kurunagala municipality will also be under isolation. Furthermore, the Mavanalla and the Ruwanvella police areas in the Kegal district will too be isolated.
If a person enters a lockdown area or leaves a lockdown area, it is an offence under the quarantine law. Therefore, we are taking a stern action against the wrongdoers. In addition to that, the vehicles that are moving through lockdown areas are permitted. However, under any circumstances, they are not allowed to stop their vehicle in the lockdown areas.
In another development, the government has also decided to isolate several apartment complexes in the Colombo district. Accordingly, the Mets on the 7 apartment complex in Mattakuliya, Mihijaya 7, Ranmini 7 in Modara will be isolated. Furthermore, Sirisandawina in Dematagoda and the NHS flats in Maligavatta will be under isolation.
The inmates of those condominiums also are not allowed to go out under any circumstances. The only exception is if a person who is in a lockdown area needs to go to a hospital on a sudden disease such as heart attack, or a pregnant mother needs to go to a hospital, they don't need a curfew permit or any other permit to proceed to the nearest hospital. In addition to that, we have arrested 2,850 suspects in respect of the violation of quarantine curfew since the 4th of October 2020 to date. And in addition to that, 430 vehicles have been taken into police custody. So during the period of last 24 hours, we have arrested 150 suspects in violation of quarantine rules and regulations. And especially, we have arrested 120 persons since the 30th of October to date in respect of the face mask concept and social distancing concept.
Now, staying with the theme of transport, following tomorrow's curfew lift, employees and essential services and factory workers under the Board of Investment and the Export Development Board are now allowed to use their curfew passes to move in and out of isolated areas. Police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana, however, said that permission is granted subject to quarantine regulations. Bus and railway services will operate from tomorrow for people commuting to destinations in the Western Province, but they will strictly be for office staff. What's more, these transport services will not operate in isolated areas, and passengers are urged to observe COVID-19 health and safety protocols at all times when using public transport. Meanwhile, it has also been decided to reduce the number of staff at public institutions in view of pandemic situation.
With the curfew in the Western Province set to be lifted tomorrow, the Ministry of Public Services, provincial councils and local government says that only the minimum number of staff required to perform duties should be called for service in public institutions due to health concerns. The ministry's statement adds that the heads of institution should decide on the minimum cadre to be called to office, and the rest of the staff should work from home. Meanwhile, the Sri Lanka Transport Board has decided to commence its short distance and long distance bus operations for the office staff. However, passengers will not be boarded or disembarked in isolated areas.
හෙට දින කෙටි සේවාව මෙන්ම දුර සේවා බස් රථත් අපි ආරම්භ කරනවා. ආසනගත මගින් පමණක් අපි ප්‍රවාහනය සඳහා තමයි උපදෙස් ලබා දීලා තියෙන්නේ. හෙට පෙරවරු 5න් පසුව කඩවත පර්යන්තය හැර සියලුම ගමනාන්ත වලින් කොළඹට අධිවේගී මාර්ගයේ බස් රථ පැමිණෙන.
In the meantime, a discussion with senior DIG in charge of the Western Province, Deshabandhu Tennakun, and private bus owners was worked off in Colombo today.
මගින් සෞඛ්‍ය උපදෙස් අනුගමනය කරමින් බස් රථයට ගොඩවීම සිද්ධ කළ යුතුමයි. මුඛාවරණයක් පැළඳිය යුතුමයි. එහෙම නැති වුණොත් අපි බස් රථයට ගොඩ කර ගැනීමක් සිද්ධ කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඇඳිරි නීතිය තවදුරටත් පවත්වන පොලිස් බලපදේශ තුල බස් රථය දහවනය කිරීමේදී මගින් ගොඩනන්වා ගන්න හෝ බස්සවන්න කිසිදු හේතුවක් නිසා කටයුතු නොකළ යුතුයි කියන ඉල්ලීම අපි කරනවා.
However, President of the Lanka Private Bus Owners Association, Gamanu Vijay Ratna, who did not participate in the meeting, had this to say.
සංගමයක් විදියට අපි අපේ බස් රථ හිමිකරුවන්ට අපි දැනුම් දීලා තියෙනවා ආරක්ෂිත ක්‍රමවේදයක් අනුගමනය කරමින් පමණයි බස් රථ ධාවනය කරන්න සුදුසු කියලා. ඒ නිසා බහුතර බස් රථ සංඛ්‍යාවක් හෙට දිනේ ධාවනය කරන්න කටයුතු කරන්නේ නැහැ.
දිනේදී දේශබන්දු තෙන්නකෝන් මහතාත් සමග බස් සංගම් සාකච්ඡාවක් තිබ්බා. අයි ඔබතුමා ඒකට සහභාගී නොවුනේ?
පොලිසියට බෑ බස් රථ නියාමනය කරන්න. කොහොම කරත් අපි දැනුම් දීලා තියෙන බස් රථ වලට ක්‍රමවේදය සකසනකනම් බස් රථ ධාවනය කරන්න එපා කියලා.
ගාරුවාදා දිනේ කොවිඩ් ප්‍රවාහන ප්‍රතිපත්ති එලි දක්වන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. මේකෙදි ඊටාම පැහැදිලිව අපි සඳහන් කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා බස් රථ හිමියන් ඒ වගේම මගීන් ඒ වගේම රියදුරු කොන්දොස්තර මහතුරුන් අනුගමනය කළ යුතු ආරක්ෂිත ක්‍රියාමාර්ග මොනවද කියන එක දැනටත් දැනුම් දීලා තියෙන ක්‍රියාමාර්ග වලට අමතරව වෙන ආසන ගාණ්ඩ ප්‍රවාහනය කිරීමට සහ 50%ක් නැත්නම් එක ආසනකට එක්කෙනෙක් බැගින් ප්‍රවාහනය කිරීම සඳහා සුළු ගාස්තු සංශෝධනයක් අපි කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඒවා කීයද කියලා අපි අඟහරුවාදට ප්‍රකාශ කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා.
Meanwhile, Sri Lanka Railways has decided to operate office trains from tomorrow onwards under COVID-19 prevention guidelines issued by the health authorities. However, these trains will not stop at police areas that are under isolation. Accordingly, trains operating in the main line will not stop at the Kalaniya station and substations of Dematagoda, Vanavasala and Eneremulla. Furthermore, the trains will also not stop at the Ragama railway station and the substations of Horape, Valpota and Batuvatta. The trains operating on the Puttalam line will not call on the substations of Peralanda, Tudella and Kudahakapola as well as the Jayala railway station. The trains will also avoid stopping at the Kurana railway station, Nigamu railway station and the Katua railway substation. In the meantime, the trains travelling on the coastal line will not stop at the Panadura and Pinmatta stations. Furthermore, trains on the Kalani Valley line will not stop at the Baseline railway station and Kota Road railway substation, while trains in the northern line will not call at the Kurunagal railway station and the Muttetugala substation.
මගීන්ට ගෙදරින් එනකොට තමන්ගේ නම ලිපිනය සහ දුරකථන අංකය ලියපු තුණ්ඩු කැබැල්ලක් රැගෙන ආවොත් ඒ අපිට පහසුවක් වෙනවා ඒ අහලන්න අපි පෙට්ටියක් ලබලා තියන්න පුළුවන් දුම්රිය ස්ථානයේ ඒ නෝගේ අනන්‍යතාවය අපිට සාතික කරගන්න පුළුවන් මේ දුම්රිය ගම අපි ගමන් විවෘත කරලා තියෙන කාර්යාලය සේවය සඳහා පැමිණෙන මගීන් සඳහා පමණයි එම නිසා නගරාන්තර ශීඝ්‍රගාමී දුම්රියන් දුරගමන් සේවා දුම්රියන් රාත්‍රී දෙපැල් දුම්රියන් කිසිවක් ධාවනයට එකතු වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
We will see you shortly after this break. Stay with us.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Now, former ambassador of Sri Lanka to Russia, Dr. Dayan Jayatilaka, believes that the victory of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the United States presidential polls will positively affect the South Asian region. He, however, cautions that Sri Lanka cannot be seen as partial to one particular side involved in regional and global power play, since the defeat of US President Donald Trump has changed the international environment. Meanwhile, Director of the Bandaranaike Centre for International Studies, Dr. Harinda Vidanage, believes that the new US president will continue the policies of the last two US presidents and the superpower won't exert unnecessary force on Sri Lanka since it doesn't want to drive the island towards China.
When you analyze Joe Biden's presidency and the impact it will have on Sri Lanka, we should understand it at three levels. First is how will Joe Biden recalibrate his relationship with the rest of the world. So his global relations, the global relationships of US with the world will have a direct bearing on Sri Lanka because there will be a significant change in certain aspects of global relations. Number two, the most critical for us is the regional relationship, the Indo-Pacific relationship. I have a feeling that Joe Biden will have to sustain the policies adopted by Barack Obama, advanced by Trump in our region because the region is geopolitically highly contested and the US's main concern is the rise of China as Chinese influence in the region. Whatever the impact we will have on regionally will be based on US-India relations in the region vis-a-vis China. So the impact on Sri Lanka, we should not be paranoid about a democratic presidency this time because the time and space context is very different from 10 years back. The American national and international foreign interests, security interests are about the Indian Ocean region and how they deal with rising China. So I do not think US would use unnecessary force or intervention on Sri Lankan affairs because that will risk Sri Lanka being pushed more towards China. I think US would not want that. US would want to avert that. So because of that, I would expect a normal to moderate similar relationship US had with Sri Lanka during the Trump presidency.
Meanwhile, former ambassador of Sri Lanka to Russia, Dr. Dayan Jayatilaka, says that the victory of both President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will be good to the South Asian region.
The Biden-Harris victory it will be very good for South Asia because for the first time in history, you will have an American vice president with South Asian origins. She will be the most powerful woman in the history of the United States. And overall, it will be good for humanity because of the issue of climate change. President Trump was totally negative on the issue of climate change. He didn't even believe that it was happening.
Dr. Jayatilaka also believes that with the defeat of US President Donald Trump, the drastic change in the international environment has begun.
Sri Lanka also has to understand that the issue of the Tamils is different from the issue of the LTT. World opinion, and most certainly the opinion in the United States, especially among the US Democrats, is that there has to be some political solution to the issue and the grievances of the Tamil people of Sri Lanka. The Biden victory was a victory against Trump's racism and white supremacism and therefore racial justice. So they will look at everything in other parts of the world through the prism of their own struggle and their own experience, their values. And therefore, Sri Lanka must know that there has been a major change now in the international environment. It has just started. It will continue to change. It's very different from when the new government of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa took over last year, whether it's the Tamil issue or the human rights issue or the issue of democracy. A democratic administration in the United States will be watching very closely at what happens in Sri Lanka in a context in which the United States, India and Australia, Japan are in some kind of great power competition with China. So we have to be very careful not to give the wrong impression of being biased towards one side.
In news just in, a 78-year-old man has died of COVID-19, marking Sri Lanka's 35th COVID-19 death. See you shortly. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, to briefly circle back to the topic of COVID-19, State Minister of Production, Supply and Regulation of Pharmaceuticals, Professor Channa Jayasumana, says that the government has not obtained any of the rapid antigen test kits that were imported by a private institution. There was speculation by various factions that a consignment of the test kits were imported to the country at government expense. Now, the State Minister also made it clear that the government has in fact followed a tender process to obtain the test kits, and that process is yet to be finalised and is not related to this particular importation.
ගෙනල්ලා තියෙන්නේ ඖෂධ නියාමන අධිකාරියේ ලියාපදිංචිය සහිත සමාගම් විසින් පෞද්ගලික අංශයේ භාවිතය සඳහා ඒවා අපි රජයට අරගෙන නැහැ මේ වනතේ කිසිසේත්ම රජයට එහෙම හිතුමතේ ගන්න පුළුවන් කමකුත් නැහැ. රාජ්‍ය ඖෂධ නීතිගත සංස්ථාව ඒ රටේ තියෙන ටෙන්ඩර් පටිපාටියට අනුව ඒ කටයුත්ත සිදු කරගෙන යනවා. ඒක තාම අවසන් වෙලා නැහැ. හැබැයි ලෝක සෞඛ්‍ය සංවිධානයෙන් සහ ආසියානු සංවර්ධන බැංකුවෙන් අපි ඉල්ලීමක් කරා කඩිනමින් මේ කට්ටල අපිට ලබා දෙන්න කියලා. ඒ අනුව ලෝක සෞඛ්‍ය සංවිධානය විසින් අප වෙත 50000ක කට්ටල ප්‍රමාණයක් ලබා දෙනු ලැබුව ආරම්භක පියවරේදී එය අද දවසේදී ශ්‍රී ලංකාවට ලැබීමට නියමිතයි. එතන මෙහි යෝග්‍යතාව පිළිබඳව නිර්දේශය ලබා දෙනු ලැබුවේ ලෝක සෞඛ්‍ය සංවිධානය විසින්. ලෝක සෞඛ්‍ය සංවිධානය අනුමත කරන ලද ආයතනයකින් තමයි මේවා නිෂ්පාදනය කරන්නේ. එය ලංකාව තුල ගැළපෙනවද නැද්ද කියන කාරණය පිළිබඳ අතිරේක වශයෙන් පරීක්ෂාවක් අප විසින් සිදු කරනු ලබනවා. හැබැයි අනිත් රටවල් වල එහෙම විශේෂ පරීක්ෂාවක් සිදු නොකර ලෝක සෞඛ්‍ය සංවිධානයේ නිර්දේශය මත මේක පාවිච්චිටත් ගන්නවා.
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.